Should you manufacture in Mexico? There are so many reasons this strategy might be right for your business. We'll discuss a few of them in today's interview with a super smart serial inventor that has bootstrapped his business he started in a college dorm and grew to an international success. If you wish you could hear from a young Elon Musk at the start of his career, then you'll love this interview.
Are you looking for new ways to make your sales grow? You've tried other podcasts, but they don't seem to know. Harvest the growth potential of your product or service as we share stories and strategies that'll make your competitors nervous. Now, here's the host of the Harvest Growth Podcast, Jon LaClare.
Welcome back to the show. I'm excited to have with me today Gabe Alba. Now, he is the founder of Riddia, Riddia. Their website is riddia.com. We're going to talk about a few of the products that he's invented over the years and some great successes he's had recently as well. First of all, I want to welcome you to the show, Gabe. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John. I'm excited. I'm live from Mexico, so neighboring countries, but I'm excited to. I think same time zone, right? You're in Colorado, right?
Yeah, Mountain Time Zone.
Gotcha.
That's one of the great things. We're going to dive into Mexico and manufacturing down there. Gabe's not on vacation in Mexico. He's working. I'm sure he's enjoying himself too. It's a great place, but there's a reason he's down there. We'll dive into that as we get it further into the story about manufacturing in Mexico. I'm really excited about that story, actually. Before we do, though, I want to do a little bit more introduction so our audience can get to know you and your products. You are really a serial entrepreneur, not that old, but you've had some great success already, in part because you started doing this back in college. Can you talk about how'd you get started in inventing and what was your first success?
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure I've always wanted to be an inventor since I could remember. So I was definitely a Lego kid. I'd play with Legos, play with kind of a builder mindset. And I was, as I got more formal into school and high school, I knew I wanted to be an engineer. So more on like kind of the technical side than just like the artistic designing side. And then I went to MIT for college and I studied mechanical engineering. And kind of in the middle of my time there, you start getting a little bit pulled into going into finance or consulting. It starts becoming kind of a thing. So I did an internship at JP Morgan, and I just realized that it was not for me. And I think when I came back to school, after that summer, I was particularly kind of fueled to give this inventor pipe dream a shot, And I figured if it didn't work out, there was always JP Morgan, or there was always kind of that path, which I'm not here to, talk badly about that. A lot of people love it, and a lot of my friends took that route. But for me, I was just like, I gotta give it a shot. I gotta give little me the shot at his dream. So quite literally, I got back to school and I started just using the machine shops and trying to come up with products or trying to invent things while I was still in school. And it just consumed me. It became my social life, really. It became like I would just hang out in the machine shop the whole time. A lot of times I kind of would sleep on the couch there. And with my friend, Victoria, who I started this with at the time, she had also worked at JP Morgan, and we just kind of had the same bond of, let's give this a shot. So we learned how to machine things. We learned how to work with, the whole array of different tools. And our first invention was this. This is now a kind of a evolved version, but essentially it's this little coffee warmer puck that, this is just a cup of water, but essentially when you get your Starbucks type cup, it fits on the bottom right here, and it just kind of keeps it hot while you're on the go. And it's rechargeable, and it uses lithium battery. And I wasn't even a coffee drinker at the time. It was just really, let's get something out there. Let's put it in people's hands. Let's see if we can. We set up the assembly line in the basement of our dorm, and we were just churning them out ourselves. We made like 1,000 units by hand. And we started importing batteries from China to our dorm. And so it was really kind of a makeshift little tiny factory. But yeah, I was, I've never looked back since. Like, that was what I loved. I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like I could tell you every little component that was in there. I can tell you every little design decision. And for me, that was like, it was my craft. I was like, wow, like this is inventing, putting something out in people's hands. That's what I want to do for the rest of my life, basically. So that was the first product. After graduation, we got a little bit of recognition kind of in the MIT bubble because of this project we had done. So we got invited to go to China by some partners, some factories that partner with MIT. And in fact, one of those was Foxconn. So we actually got like a VIP tour of Foxconn, which was amazing because, it's the biggest factory in the world. And it's really basically like a city. So in Shenzhen, like it has its own street signs and roads and everything, like dorms. And we got to see just what the manufacturing world is like from the inside out. And even though we were very impressed and we were like, wow, this is definitely the hub of where things get made, that entire regional kind of geographical area, we also realized like it seemed like it was going to follow this pattern that the US followed in the Industrial Revolution, where you have these places that are the manufacturing hubs, and then they actually get too rich to sustain manufacturing. So, and this is the reason why in New York City, you can go to Chelsea Market, which used to be a factory, and now it's like a place you get $15 tacos. Like it just kind of outgrows itself in a way. And we were seeing that was happening in Shenzhen. Shenzhen is a super city. It's like the buildings are taller than New York City. And you're like, is this really, is this really where you can still make things? So when we flew back to the States, rather than just quoting the coffee warmer with a manufacturer and going kind of through the natural hoops of getting a product to market, we were like, okay, well, one, we don't want to pigeonhole ourselves into the coffee warmer kids. Like it wasn't about coffee for us. It wasn't about that product. It was about inventing and about making a lot of different things. So for us, it was more about like a kind of Disneyland for engineers where we could just keep making things. And we realized that if we just put all our eggs in this one basket for this one product, we weren't going to be an invention company. We were going to be a coffee product company. And then two, the realizations I told you about China. And then we were like, yeah, I'm Mexican. My parents are Mexican and I grew up speaking Spanish. And I was like, what if we give Mexico a shot? What if we like go down there and start a little factory, which really, since we had set up assembly lines in our dorm, what is a factory? A few tables, a couple of machines. Can't we just kind of do that ourselves and then make it this little kind of think tank where we keep coming up with products? And that was it. We took the money we used from those 1,000 units we had sold. It was completely bootstrapped. And we flew down to Mexico and bought an old injection molding machine, like from a fisherman or something. Like we found it on like Mexican eBay, and some fisherman guy had a molding machine and it didn't work. It was completely rusty and all like the electronics were spewing out. But it was the same make and model of the machine I knew how to use in college. So I fixed it up. Essentially, I restored it, and that became the first factory. And now we fast forward, we're like it's kind of funny. That was in a nun convent. It was the only place we were able to rent, because you pay the nuns with cash under the table, essentially, because they're like, yeah, well, we're not even using it. Like, it's this whole kind of like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have said that, but like, it was this very makeshift factory. There was a big chapel in the middle, and in the lease terms, they said you can modify the space, but you can't touch the chapel. So the factory just kind of had a chapel in the middle. It was this very kind of bizarre. It wasn't an industrial spot. Now we've moved to an industrial location. We have more machines. We have full assembly lines. It's kind of always buzzing here and stuff. So we've definitely outgrown that the little convent factory. But that's where it all started. So, I didn't have a master plan. We were kind of just going with the flow as things were happening. And yeah, if we've launched more products since, and it's the company has been growing, and it's been such a journey.
Such a fun story. I love it. And I know you talk about bootstrapping and really kind of just figuring things out. And I love how you transform that to, in the beginning, really doing a lot on your own in terms of selling and making it a dorm, to now creating your own full factory down in Mexico. And like you said, really just figuring it out as you go. And sometimes we have this master plan and we never stick to it anyways, right? Like it gives you a direction, but the life changes, right? The business never goes perfectly as planned. So sometimes you just got to jump in and figure it out as you go. And you've learned a lot along the way. And we'll dive into a little bit more about Mexico in a minute, but I want to talk about what's been your most successful products. We talked about your first product, and fast forward a little bit from there. What's been your most successful product to date?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the first product was under its own line called Coffee Cookie. And the original idea was to launch a bunch of different product brands. Relatively recently, like a year and a half ago, we decided to instead make one kind of master brand where we put all our inventions under, and that's called Riddia. So the Riddia product line, it still has the original coffee cookie, but now it's called Riddia Sip. So we've since upgraded the product, and but it's more or less the same core invention. And then we have this smart nightlight called Riddia Sleep, and then our best seller is this, it's called Riddia Press, and it's a rechargeable clothes iron. And it's like a travel iron, and I have one right here. So it's very small. It's about the size of a computer mouse, and you can take it on trips, on places that you can't usually take irons. It's you throw it on your carry-on. It's battery powered, so it turns on, it heats up really quickly. Essentially, we're using our patented heating technology that heats up just super quickly. It's super portable. And it's great when you're in a pinch, and when you're on the go. It charges with USB, so it works in Europe, or it works in America, or works wherever, because it doesn't have the voltage rating of only working in 110 volt plugs. So yeah, that's the current product line. And now we're actually looking into more sophisticated products, and we're looking to have this next line of products even be one step further. Like I said, the real heart of this company is keep making products and try to make those products great, and keep improving the process and the craft of getting a product that people want or need in their hands. So that's what that's the flywheel we're trying to get spinning here, is every product be better than the last one, so these next products we're about to launch, I'm so excited about. I think this is really like the kind of the dawn of a new era of technology that actually helps people. We've kind of mastered the craft of product development now. We've just in this past year, essentially, we've moved like 17,000 of these units, and they've all been made really like the assembly lines behind me. It's homegrown. We always thought about it as like farm to table, but for product development. That was our thought process. So yeah, it's quite a romantic process to be so close to the journey of getting raw materials and turning them into a finished good. So that's always what it's been about for us.
I love that analogy of farm to table for product development. It's a great way to think about it, and really finding for needs and satisfying those in an attractive product, but a product that works also. I have to say I'm a huge fan, especially of the travel iron. One thing that really stands out to me is that you solve the problem in a new and different way. Travel irons have been around for a long time, right? So I remember I lived in Brazil many years ago, and I traveled all over the place for a couple of years, and essentially lived out of a suitcase for a while. And I brought my little travel iron with me. And all it was a small version of an iron that didn't work as well as a bigger iron, right? You still had the big cord you're dealing with. What I love about yours is you've taken the idea and made it not just small, but better, right? So many travel products are like, hey, let's just make something small that doesn't work quite as well, but you're only going to use it for a couple of days, right? But your travel iron, one of the biggest issues I have with irons in general, right, is you get that dangly cord, right? It's a pain. It's always like you're fighting against the cords. You're trying to iron something or whatever. The fact that you've gotten rid of that and made this product that works as well as a full-size iron, right? Got rid of the cord, and frankly could be used at home for a non-travel purpose. It's great. You looked at not just making something smaller, but really better. And I think as I've seen your products you've got coming out as well. I know we're not getting into details on this show, but I'd love to have you back on once you launch especially your next one coming out. It is so exciting. So I do encourage our audience to follow along. Check out Riddia.com, RIDDIA.com, for when it does launch, I think later this year, if I remember, this new line of products as well. It's really exciting. It's a really cool technology that we'll kind of end there in terms of that discussion. But come back. Yeah, pay attention to that. It's really exciting, the technology that's coming. All right, so let's go back to manufacturing in Mexico. Mm-hmm. So I love the concept, going from inventor to manufacturer. Not everybody has that capability, right? Not everyone's smart enough to get into MIT and study mechanical engineering and figure things out. But I think there's advantages in Mexico, whether you're doing the factory, like you've built it from scratch, which is so cool. And if you're listening to this podcast, I do encourage you, go check it out on YouTube, because you can see behind Gabe, he's in his sort of factory floor part of it, right? Like what he's put together. It's really cool. So check it out if you're just listening to the show, for sure. But what have you found beyond, doing it yourself in Mexico? What are some of the advantages of Mexico versus maybe manufacturing in the US or mm-hmm. manufacturing over in Asia?
Mm-hmm. So I think some of the biggest advantages are actually just the simple low-hanging fruits, right? Like time zone is a huge advantage. Like the fact that we can be sitting here and having this conversation, and I'm pretty much following the normal progression of my day. You're following the normal progression of yours. Like, that is huge, especially on the U.S. side of things. We're in New York City, and when there's times when I need to get to Mexico City. We're not in Mexico City, but if I need to get to Mexico City at noon and be in the city, you can leave early morning in New York and be in Mexico City at noon. It's a possibility thanks to the 2-hour time shift, so it's not a major time shift. That's huge, right? Like that is, it's like basically like a portal that you enter a different world in. So another thing is the ecosystem here. When we were in China and looking at Shenzhen and everything, I look at the ecosystem in Mexico now as an early version of Shenzhen, of the Pearl River Delta area. Like there's so many little things here that are almost hard to. They're never going to end up in bullet points on a pitch deck. They're just, you have to be here and be like, wow, thanks to the ecosystem here. Example, this is our we don't make the boxes ourselves, right? We do use certain suppliers. So we have a box supplier. I kid you not, I could get to our box supplier in a 3-minute walk. I can go out the door, turn left, hit a block and a half, and I'm at a factory like this, but specifically for making packaging and boxes. That is that doesn't have anything to do with us being here or anything. That's just the ecosystem around here, right? Another thing is just the talent here is unbelievable. Like the engineers we have are so on par. I put them up against any of my MIT peers any day of the week. Like that they train in the same software, in the same procedures, in the same machinery that we all learned over there. It's culturally very similar, which helps a lot, right? Like when you're trying to spearhead a new project or something, there aren't that many cultural barriers between how things work in America versus how things work in Mexico. Oh, there are, of course, differences, but it's pretty seamless. And also just, realistically, the ability to scale up assembly and manufacturing, it's different. It's still the idea is to move manufacturing to nearshore at first, and then to move it first back into the Americas, and then eventually back into the United States. But I think this is the next big step in that wave, right? Like currently, it's still just more accessible to get a product made in a country like Mexico versus the States. But yeah, this trend this nearshoring trend, I think, is going to be huge. Not only the time zone things, but just the proximity of having your assembly lines right next to your target market, right? That is huge. That is, it's like what they say, location, 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 right? So that's the same thing here. Like imagine having your entire production line, your entire design studio, everything in the bordering country to your market, versus literally in the farthest possible place on earth. Like it's just a lot of the natural things that come to mind when you play them out. They 100% are huge critical factors in setting up supply chains in a more nearshore way.
Yeah, and I'll back that up. I mean, you're certainly closer to the manufacturing side than I am, but we've had clients produce products all over the world, a lot of them in China, right? That's a very normal thing. It's an easy infrastructure because it's mature. It's been around for a long time. Costs are low, but there's a lot of downsides to definitely consider. And I think being close, both in culture as well as location, can make a huge difference. So Mexican manufacturing, depending on what type of product you're doing, if you're working with a third party factory, right? So if you're not like Gabe and doing this yourself, it typically is going to be a little bit more expensive than in China, but you save on time and also the cost of logistics. I mean, you make something in China, you've got to boat it across. It could be 3 or 4 weeks, right? If nothing goes wrong in the supply chain, right? To get it here. So there's always this planning. You got to plan weeks, months in advance. And in Mexico, you've got an urgent need, like, hey, we got to double our production. We got a surge in demand or whatever. Let's truck it across the border, right? It makes it so much faster and easier. And not to mention, you talked about culture. I would add, I don't know if culture or language is the right way to describe it, but a great thing about working with Chinese manufacturers is they are willing to be entrepreneurial and figure things out with you. But it's a slow process because there's just an understanding gap, right? Even, I don't know if it's driven by language or culture or whatever it might be, but you say, hey, I want to make this tweak or change to my product, make me a prototype, send it across. And of course, that takes a lot of time just to ship it, all that kind of stuff, right? You get it, like, that's not what I asked for, right? Like it's like this stepwise process. And I think we've experienced through our clients when they work with closer in Mexico, it's a different language, right? But the culture is so much closer in that it's oftentimes a faster progression to figure out, okay, that's what you're talking about for the next step. That's what you're talking about for the change. And again, this is talking if you're, working with somebody that might be manufacturing for you as a third party, which I imagine most of our audience is more on those lines than having the intelligence to be able to figure it out on your own, like you've done, Gabe, which is so impressive. Well, is there a resource that comes to mind that you'd recommend for our audience that has been helpful to you in your entrepreneurial journey?
Mm-hmm. So actually going back to that JP Morgan internship, I was reading the book 0 to 1 at the time. And like, it's, a lot of the resources I'll recommend are really more kind of spiritual entrepreneurial resources, like that talk more about the mindset, the taking kind of the leap of faith rather than like business books and like what to do and how to handle things. So 0 to 1, I still think it's like the most influential book in terms of my entrepreneurial journey. And there's a paragraph that's like, why is everybody going into banking and consulting? Again, not to attack those professions, but why is everybody going into banking and consulting? And when when they could be giving essentially their childhood dreams a shot. And I stopped reading the book after that paragraph. I don't even know how the book ends. Eventually, I think I picked it up again and finished it, but that was, to me, all I needed. I was like, that's so true. Like, why don't I give it a shot, And, but yeah, and just having I think the real mission of what we're building here is to get more people to build their own factories, to get this to be the new trend, right? To not do the third party manufacturing, because I think that's just something that's really broken in the industry of hardware. In what other world, like if you're a chef, you don't have you make the dish and then you cut the onions, right? Like, it's part of the journey to do the full stack, to do the soup to nuts. And in our industry, somehow we've accepted that it's a chain link industry, that it's completely middlemen to middlemen. And that's why it's so hard to make hardware, right? That's why it's so hard to make products, because we've made it into a system that it's just so kind of convoluted. Whereas here, the tables behind us, they really should be seen more as like, oh, this is the kitchen, right? This is the kitchen. And then the machines in the machine room next to us, like, oh, those are the machines you'd see in a kitchen, right? Like, this is where we're creating things, inventing things. You can make things in small batches. You can get them to your customers' hands. They can give you feedback. You can iterate on them. So I think that's really the mission we're trying to do is change kind of the paradigm of product development. And the more you do it yourself, the better. So that's just to kind of touch on your earlier point. And I think that is very on theme with the kind of the 0 to 1 ethos. In terms of other resources, I've also really liked The Hard Thing About Hard Things. It's another book that, again, is kind of more about the concept of entrepreneurship. And then one of my favorite books, just in general, is Shoe Dog, which isn't really an entrepreneurship book. It's more of a memoir. It's the story of Phil Knight, how he started Nike. But you just really kind of start seeing that certain companies are a life's journey, right? There are the kind of the Silicon Valley idea that you're going to build this hockey stick curve company in 2 to 3 years, and you take in this much money, you do this, and blah blah blah. Like where it's like this formulaic approach to entrepreneurship. And I think every company has a bit of that, including ourselves. We have raised money. We bootstrapped for a while, and then raised a little bit of money, and then But I think there are certain companies that when you have like a certain mission that take a long time to build, right? Like that's, I think, the thing I like about the Nike book is it's really, you start seeing this is the memoir of a person who is building this company over time. It's not a business book. It's a book about a person living his life. And yeah, I think those are like the top 3 for me that come to mind. And again, they're not business books. They're not like, this is what to do. This is how P&L works. I had no idea I didn't know what a P&L was, embarrassingly, till recently, like till a few years ago, right? Like I'm an inventor by trade. I'm a creator. I'm not a businessman. And that's something that I've been learning as I go. But yeah, I think the journey of entrepreneurship, it's so full of ups and downs that you really just have to do something that you love, that otherwise it's too hard. It's not worth it if you don't love it. Like, yeah.
I love that. It's so much to digest, I think, just from the last couple of minutes of what you said, and I really resonate with a lot of that. I've heard of the 0 to 1 book. I've not read it. On your recommendation, I need to go out and read it because I love that philosophy or that ethos of really building your dream, right? You got to take the chance. I went through a similar journey after getting my MBA. All my buddies were going into banking in New York or consulting with big consulting firms or whatever. And the world draws you towards that, right? Like it's a lot of hard work, but it's in some ways the easier approach, right? Like there's so much risk involved in entrepreneurship, and it's not for everybody, right? You've got to have the passion, but even if you do have that passion, like I felt like I did back in the day, it still was like I was almost going to take the job, right? Like in those regards, and ultimately, went in a direction that took me to OxyClean many years ago, or working with entrepreneurs and really learning from them, and then launching my own now 17 years ago or whatever, and been doing that for a long time. But the world does almost want to slow you down. So finding your passion and really sticking with it, I think it's inspirational the way you describe that. And Shoe Dog, if you haven't read that, if you're a listener, you have to read Phil Knight's book as well. It's one of the best reads I've had of any type of book. It's very inspirational. Whether you like him or Nike shoes or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's a phenomenal story. If you have any kind of entrepreneurial inkling in your body, check it out for sure to learn from that. Well, Gabe, this has been a really fun interview. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you think could be helpful for our audience?
I appreciate a chance to get to share the story. For me, it's just been a crazy ride. It's very exciting. So I think we covered a lot in a short amount of time. And yeah, I guess to give a little teaser on our next line of products, it's we're at the point where we're figuring out more technological advances in the types of products we make. So these next products have more sophisticated electronics and better form factors. So just to give a little teaser, our next product, it's a wearable smart device for I think a demographic that very much needs a glow up in the technology that assists their lives. I don't know if that's the sort of trailer version, right? I didn't say much there, but it is something I'm very excited about. I'm working around the clock on the development of it. I was here in the factory yesterday till midnight the day before, which was a Sunday. I was here very late. It's just so exciting to start working with more sophisticated products. I think but it's been quite the journey. Like I've been at this for a handful of years now, and only now are we getting to the type of products where I'm like, oh, this is where it's going to get real good. So. Yeah, other than that, thanks so much for having me on and to allowing me to tell my story.
Absolutely. It's been a lot of fun for me. I'm sure for our audience as well. I do encourage everyone who's listening or watching, please go to Riddia.com, Riddia.com. There you'll see many of the products that we talked about today. But as we kind of alluded to, please make sure you check back in a couple of months to see these cool new technologies that Gabe is bringing out. It really is exciting and very different. I can't wait to really have those come out as well. And we'd love to have you back on the show. And when you do launch, we'll talk more about it with our audience too. I do want to tell our audience, please, make sure you reach out to us if you ever need help with your own strategy. My team absolutely loves working with inventors and entrepreneurs. Over the years, we've launched and grown hundreds of products since 2007. And we learned some of our strategies while growing OxyClean back in the Billy Mays days. So we're here to help. Please go to harvestgrowth.com and set up a call if you'd like to discuss further.